Greetings again. This video covers the second part of the notes from Whitlock Schluter chapter 1. It's focusing on section 1.5. Now, there's only two kinds of empirical research. They are experiments and observational studies. Okay, let's talk about the distinction between these two kinds of studies. All right, it's in table 4. This can be boiled down very simply. The underlying concept of an experiment is that we control the explanatory variables. Whereas by contrast, in the observational study, there is no control of the explanatory variables. What we're doing is we're simply observing the explanatory variables. Okay, no control. As a result, are we able to determine causality in the experiment? Yes, we can determine causality. Differences observed in the response variables can be inferred to be due to the explanatory because we're controlling all relevant factors. Whereas in the observational study, no. Differences that we observe may be due to confounding variables, other outside variables that we have not controlled. Now, how do we achieve this? Well, in the experiment, we use random assignment. So, random assignment. Whereas in the observational study, we rely upon what's called random sampling. And these were mentioned some in the book. So I don't need to go into detail about that here. Okay, that boils it down. So if you have, let's say, a machine that measures the blood pressure of a group of students, is that therefore an experiment because we've used a machine? No, it's an observational study. On the other hand, if I simply take the group of students and I put them into two groups, randomly picking who goes into which group, we got group A and group B, and then I have group A run stairs, I have group B do nothing, and then we just use our fingers upon their wrist to measure their pulse. Have I conducted an experiment if I'm measuring difference in their heartbeat per minute? Yes. No machine, but I controlled who was in each group. We can do more detail later, but that's the nub of it. Okay. Now, when we collect data then, bias can enter. Bias typically enters in sampling procedures, so we want to avoid it. Now, when it comes in due to the methodology itself, then that's what we call sampling method. So bias due to sampling method. Now, I've got three different kinds of sampling method bias. The first one is wrong sampling frame. Where the sampling frame is list of units to sample from. For example, if the population is Viola, the sampling frame would be the registrar's list of enrolled students. Obviously, we don't always have a sampling frame when we're conducting a study. That would be nice. Another one is called a convenience sample. This is when you just take data that whatever you can get. If you're going to measure, let's say, leaves for a certain kind of tree, you just walk outside. Maybe we're doing olive trees at Viola, and you just go into the park over there with all the olive trees, and you just start picking up leaves. No attempt to be random. You just get whatever's convenient. That's a convenient sample. The last one is volunteerism, or self-selection. Now, I have an example of this. Let's pop over here. Okay. In the 1930s, researcher Alfred Kinsey, if you've heard of the movie or if you have thought about watching it, I'd recommend you don't. He is a famous sexual deviance researcher, and according to his research, he reported that 10% of the U.S. population was homosexual. Estimates today are much lower. What happened? Well, first of all, he interviewed volunteers, and secondly, he only sampled from 3 particular places in the country. So if I could diagram this, then the diagram would look like this. Okay, if you have the US here, well, he got college students, and he got mental hospitals, and then he got prisoners. Okay, so let's say we got mental hospitals, and we have prisoners. And these are the 3 groups he took from the US population, and then he inferred this to all males. Now, that commits both the wrong sampling frame as well as self-selection. Of college students, mental hospital patients, and prisons, he only was able to get those who would agree to be part of his study. What kind of bias do you think might creep in there? Yeah. Okay, next is called non-response bias. This bias is bias due to missing measurements. And lastly, go down to the bottom one here, is response bias, where this is a response due to mismeasurement. If you have police officers taking a survey in the neighborhood about how well they're doing, you can imagine people might not respond in an unbiased fashion. Now, as for the other form, the non-response bias, got an example here. A former student of mine worked for an online software company with right around 12,000 customers. And their question was, their product was a software product that all the customers used. They wanted to know if some of the customers would be willing to upgrade their software service for $30 a month. Now, in their mind, they reasoned that if half of them wanted to do it, then it would be worth doing financially. So they sent an email survey to all 12,000 customers, and they got this result: 1,000 yeses, 1,000 nos, whole bunch didn't respond. They assumed it's about 50-50. In fact, they were going to make it financially if only 40% were on the yes side. And they got 50-50, so they said, yes, we're going to run it. Okay, they did, and here's what happened. 1,200 did, 10,800 didn't. He asked me, what went wrong? How could I fix it? I told him that he first needed to check how many of these 1,000 yeses were in the 1,200 yes group. It turns out about 986 were in this group. Very few were not truthful. The problem is virtually every non-respondent wound up being in the no group, and that was what caused them to lose money. What's the fix? Do not attempt to sample everybody. Only use a small controlled sample. If they would have done 100, I would have had much more confidence in that, because on those 100, you can use all your sampling resources and follow up and make sure you do not suffer from non-response bias. Last topic, principles of experimental design. This is going to be focused on in chapter 14, so I'm not going to go over these. I will just point out that there's two categories. There are those that seek to eliminate bias by measuring the center accurately. Remember, the three key features of a data set are shape, center, and spread. And so this is getting one of those. And the other one is to reduce the error. In other words, be more precise. So that means we want the spread to be minimized. That's the third key feature of data set: shape, center, and spread. Okay, and I think last topic, potential issues in experimental design. This is not covered in the book, so I just want to give you a few things to kind of think about. If you're doing human experimentation, which is less frequent in biology, but it's good to know about this, psychological influences can come in. There's a placebo effect, which is a psychological influence from non-active treatments. Okay, you've heard of the sugar pill. A Hawthorne effect is a psychological effect simply from being in an experiment. Being in an experiment. Yay, I'm in the experiment. I'm in the experiment. This is great. What do you want me to do, doc? The patient acts in a way that it's not normal to them, and so the results bring about some form of bias. The experimenter, psychological effect induced by the experimenter. This might happen, for example, if I'm doing a drug study and I've got an active drug in group A, and then in group B, they have the placebo, and so I go up to group B. Please take your pill for today, patient. Thank you very much. Group A. All right, how you doing today? Ready for another shot in our study? Oh, thank you so much for your participation. And you can see how we might get a little bit of bias there. Okay. Another issue that can arise in both experimental and observational studies is generalizability. Okay. Ecological validity is when an experiment has been performed in a lab setting, but its results do not hold in the real setting or the natural setting. So we have lab versus nature. Lab versus natural setting. You could have some genetically modified plant that when you've got it in the lab, you're controlling everything, you just have the modification and the not, and you can measure what's going on. Whereas when you put it out in nature, there's other factors that blur the signal that you have been able to achieve in the lab. This is a big issue in biological studies. Okay, and then generalizability. Are there experimental results generalizable beyond the population from which the sample was taken? Okay, sample. If I do a study and find out that freshmen experience a significant amount of spiritual growth when they come to Biola, does that mean that it also happens when they're sophomores, juniors, or seniors? If I say that, then I'm generalizing beyond the original study. And that concludes chapter 1 of Whitlock and Schluter.